What's up, everybody? My name's Indy, and the gentleman next to me, that's Mr. J. Powell from It Depends. Powell Group Consulting.
Yes, from It Depends.
It Depends. And welcome to another exciting, amazing episode of Indie Game Business. Today, we've got Mike Sanders, the CEO of Puny Human. I love it. And when I hear that, that's what I think, Puny Human.
Good.
Yeah, so the title of this is Lessons Learned from Running a Game Studio for 15 years. It's going to be a good one.
So yeah, my notes for this one, Mike, are already like all over the place. So this is probably going to be one of the more casual, freeform, ADD-driven talks that we've had this year. But let's start with, tell us how you got into the industry originally, and then walk us through your career up to this point.
Oh boy, yeah. So I know that this is a question that routinely guests are asked. So I guess my question would be: do you want the abridged 1 minute version, or do you want the 8 minute sort of
8 minute?
Okay, all right.
Well, we want all the juicy, gory details.
Okay, interesting. Because I will say that it's pretty common for people fall into two camps. 50% of the people get into the industry in a very unconventional way, and then I'd say 50% are a little bit more conventional. But what is conventional, right? So
yeah, that's the
okay. Well, yeah. Let's see. Going way back to like 2001 or 2002. I, at a very young age, liked to do websites. That was kind of my big thing for a long time, was web design and development and getting into programming as much as I can, a lot of PHP work. And I made websites for a while as a kid. And then a friend of mine on the internet, we decided to start our own game journalism website. So, reviews and previews, and kind of back in the day when you could do that. And it was called GameAura.com. And we had it around for like maybe 2 or 3 years. And it actually did really well. Like we got free games sent to us, which is as a 12, 13, 14-year-old kid. That was pretty cool, right?
Gold right there.
Yeah, it's awesome. It was a ton of fun. And I remember, we had it for a number of years, and one of the websites, because whether or not I think journalists admit this or not, it's true. But some journalists, especially smaller sites like ours, you would source your information from other news sites. So one of the big ones that I liked to go to was a recently formed Planet Half-Life, which was part of the sort of GameSpy network. I don't know if I don't think it's still around, but it was a great source for a lot of Half-Life news, because Half-Life 2 had been announced a couple of years prior. And there was this mod that was coming out for the original Half-Life that looked really, really cool. It's called Natural Selection. And it was like this asynchronous hybrid RTS FPS game. And I got really invested in that community. Like I was 14, 15. I should have been like going around hanging out with friends and being outside. But no, I was trying to, do all sorts of things. And one of the things I fell into, and I'm going to date myself here heavily, was helping run a Shoutcast radio station. If you remember Shoutcast, it was called NS Radio, and I got involved in the competitive scene. And this was before like MLG was a thing. I think before MLG, it was we had the Cyber Amateur Athlete League, so CAL for Natural Selection, and I used to go on this Shoutcast server and provide like color commentary or sort of real-time analysis of a competitive match that was going on way before Twitch, right? So you had to connect to this stream and listen to people like me sort of say like, oh, this person's moving here, this person's moving there, they killed this person, right? And we got a chance at one point to interview the creator of the mod Natural Selection, and his name's Charlie Cleveland. And after the interview, he messaged me on another dating here, right? IRC. He messaged me on IRC, and he was like, hey, if you're kind of serious about getting into the games industry, here's a couple of things that you should look into. You should probably sort of look at maybe signing up for some open betas, some closed betas, closed alphas, etc. One of the first ones I got on was DEF CON by Introversion Software, and then Ground Control 2 by Massive Entertainment, way back in the day before Ubisoft, I think, purchased them. And so I was just doing a lot of like early QA as a kid for free. And then eventually I sort of just kept doing that. I got involved with the modding community very heavily. So Insurgency, the modern shooter that's out, was a mod back then, and then Chivalry, if people are familiar with Chivalry, was also a mod, Age of Chivalry. So I got pretty involved in those teams, and one of there was a game that was coming out in late 2005 that I was really interested in, called Dystopia, and the team had been working on that for probably about a year at that point. They released it, and I was like, I'm all into this. I'm quitting everything else. This is the coolest, so cool of a game. And I got involved in that, helping out with sort of running communities, and I formed the sort of competitive league for it. And then eventually got kind of brought on as a playtester by the team. And around that time, I was applying for jobs, right? Because I was early, I was kind of early out of high school. Unfortunately, just didn't have a home for a while. But on my friend's couch, I remember I was using his laptop, and I found a posting on Craigslist, of all places, for a QA tester job, and I applied with a resume that had Insurgency and Chivalry and DEF CON and Introversion and Dystopia, all these mods on it. And I got an interview with it was with Epic Games. So technically it was with Microsoft way back in the day, with this really, really fantastic person, Tanya Watson. She went on to become the COO of Squanch, and she was at Epic for a long time, and now I think she's got some cool things going on here pretty soon. And I was at Epic for a little bit, and then I ended up going to Red Storm after that. So I was there for 3 years, worked on all sorts of different cool games. And around that time, I also took the team, the Dystopia team, and we kind of decided to go, I guess you could say, like, legitimate, become, not just a mod team. And then we said, hey, let's form a company. Let's make other games besides this mod that we're working on. So I did a lot of that while working at Red Storm, and then eventually working in IT. And I guess the rest is sort of history, right? Like, it was very unconventional, just being involved in a lot of different cool communities and trying to do as much as you could, right? So, like, learning lots of web development, trying to figure out how games are made at that time. It was a lot of source modding tools. There wasn't really like any kind of free engine that you could download, and if there was, it wasn't super well documented, and there wasn't a whole lot of information. So just trying to figure out games and how to make them at a very young age. But yeah,
I like the way that, given your time frame, you basically did the tour de Raleigh of major game companies.
Yeah.
I mean, Insomniac wasn't here yet, so it was basically Epic and Red Storm, and
our Atomic Games, I think, was here. They were working on 6 Days in Fallujah, which was recently re-released. And then I think was a Vicious Cycle and Virtual Heroes were here.
That's right.
Yeah. So not a huge presence. I mean, obviously in Raleigh we have tons and tons of companies now, and people, they don't seem to know it that well, but yeah, it's a huge presence now. It's great.
So we were talking before we went live. You did a series last year, or a post last year on LinkedIn about 15 lessons learned from running a studio, because Puny Human was 15. Was it?
Yeah. Well, so technically it was 16. I think it was formed in is August 29th, yeah, in 2007, I believe. So I think that would have made it 16 or 15 years, something like that. But the early parts are a little hazy for me, right? It's been a long time, I'm getting the grays, so I can't really remember too much.
We've been getting the grays. I'm
getting
like
the grays,
fully gray at this point. This industry prematurely ages you.
Oh yeah, 100%.
So do you want to run through those? Do you want to, or highlights from?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. I mean, I think, everyone, one thing to kind of keep in mind with a lot of this information is that your mileage is going to vary, because the industry is this changing, amorphous sort of blob that kind of just changes and evolves all the time. And obviously we're encountering this massive change right now. So, take what you will, but I would say so. Kind of following what I was talking about earlier with, I was at Red Storm at the time, and I was still kind of going home. I think unlike a lot of game developers who kind of go home and want to unplug, like just get away from what they do on their 9 to 5. I went home and I still wanted to make games, right? So I had this group of modding friends, and we decided that we would go serious, right? We would take the mod, support it, but make other games, which for us was new. And I think that year in 2007, I would say the big lesson that stuck out for us was, you hear the phrase "don't sweat the small stuff," but my attorneys are probably not going to like this. I would say don't sweat the big stuff too, right? And it depends, I think, a little bit on the size of your group. At the time, we were just all unpaid. We didn't we were trying to figure out what we were doing as we were going. But, the legal part of forming a company really only came about because Valve approached us at the time, and they were like, we'd love to put Dystopia on Steam. Because prior to this, you couldn't find something like Dystopia on Steam. It was a mod you had to download and install over Half-Life 2. And we were like, oh, this is so cool. We're going to have our mod on Steam. Anybody will be able to download it without a whole crazy installation. And at that point, we were like, wow, in order to sign the agreement, we need to hurry up and form a company, So we did that very quickly. And then also, I think the other big thing that sort of happened that we started this process of trying to name ourselves. At the time, the modding group was just called Team Dystopia. And it took us many years to finally arrive at the name Puny Human. We went through a lot of iterations. I think the first was something like Brawling Monkey Studios or whatever. And then we went to Signal to Noise and then Uprising Studios, which was actually taken by somebody at the time, and then finally we landed with Puny Human. But that was a fun year. It was a good year, and I think the lesson was don't sweat the big stuff. 2008, money was kind of introduced, and I would say that the lesson for that year is when money is introduced, problems are going to happen. It complicates things, right? If you have a small company, a small studio, and you're just starting out without any kind of significant funding, then figure out the sort of royalties, the ownership, the contracting relationship as best as you possibly can, just because engaging with an attorney is going to be difficult. It's going to be expensive. And I think if you can have those kind of conversations in earnest early on, it's better. If you have funding, right, which I work with a lot of teams these days that do have upfront funding, or they go and get VC investment, I would say don't race to make everybody an employee. Don't force it. Some people enjoy doing the work as maybe a hobby or in their part-time. Figure out really respectful contractor relationships with people. So we, that was 2008. We were trying to figure out we got a little bit of money coming in, what we should do. Obviously pay your bills first, in 2009, that was an interesting year. Things really started to heat up for us. So, we had finally, I think, landed on our name. And that year we're starting to look for new games to make. And we found this one team that was also making a mod. They were called Ninja Workshop. Really, really great, bright bunch of individuals that were super talented. And they were making a mod that they called Berimbau. And that's a musical instrument. And, we noticed that the mod it showed a lot of promise. It showed a lot of opportunity. So, we sort of reached out to them and we said, hey, you have what we don't. At the time, doing a lot of this work for free, or some of the work for free, we didn't have, a lot of, really talented animation, I'd say animators or engineers. We had designers, we had artists, we had sound engineers, we had QA, we had production. But we did a really bad job before finding this team of admitting our blind spots. So you have to constantly admit your blind spots, was the kind of big thing that stuck out for 2009. We ended up merging with that team. And it was great because they had engineers, they had animators, they had a really, really fantastic guy who did it all. Michael Chang is his name. He ended up being the lead designer, the lead animator, and the lead engineer. So pretty much the lead developer on the game for many years to follow. So we merged with that team. And then we eventually renamed Barenbow to be Blade Symphony, which was our second game. And then the next year was a distraction. And this is pretty common, I think, for a lot of smaller teams, and honestly, even bigger teams. I've seen this. Over the last 4 years, I've been engaged with a number of companies, big companies that have high amounts of revenue, and they're probably 50, 60 employees, and they stretch themselves too thin. So, don't do too much at once, right? At that time, we still had Dystopia. We wanted to support it. We were releasing updates, big updates, right? We did a big update with DJ Wheat, if anybody remembers him. He went on to go work for Twitch. But we were also trying to develop Blade Symphony, and we were trying to think of new games and work on those new games and actually try and see what we could do. We were using the PopCap engine back then, which is, since not exactly an engine you can use, but we were just trying to figure things out. Don't stretch yourself too thin, right? Focus on one product, right? We had maybe a 15-person team at this point. Focus on making that thing great. I would say after that, in 2011, we found very quickly that the creative process needs time. It's serious, like not just a game designer, but the entirety of the team. You need to give people breathing space. You need to reduce as much stress as you possibly can. You need to work with people to sort of get them away from something for a while, right? You can just sort of be looking at something a foot in front of it, right? And you're just going to get lost. You lose your periphery. So I would say, the creative process in general, when coming up with new game ideas, really needs to be respected overall. And in 2011, I don't think we were doing a good enough job of that, right? We needed to take some time and write out ideas and think about things holistically, and then over time, step away from them, right? Step away from your idea for a while, and if you come back to it, right? If you it's that kind of like, if you love it, let it go sort of thing. In a big way, you have to do that with your games too. So, step away from it. And if you come back to it and you're still excited about it, that's a really good sign. Let's see, we're in 2012 at this point. I mentioned that one developer, Michael Chang, worked with him for many years. He's really, really talented, probably the first most talented creative technologist I ever met. I would say that year I learned a hard lesson for me personally, which was that whoever you have on the team that is the most passionate about what they're building, give them the longest lead, right? If they're showing up, they're spending a lot of time on something, they're thinking about it all the time. He would tell me he's sitting in San Francisco in the BART in the subway, and he'd just be thinking about Blade Symphony all the time, constantly jotting down ideas. Give that person as much space and as much influence and authority on the team to really get their creative vision out into the world. 2013, we ended up going to Kickstarter, which was awesome. We this was before Tim Schafer came along and had that like $1 million Kickstarter, and everybody was like, "Wow, oh my god, you can do a lot with Kickstarter." But this was only about $25,000, which at the time for a team like us, that was a lot of money. And we launched our Kickstarter in March 2013, and then we released the game in early access in 2013. But then Polygon later in the year did a whole spread on Blade Symphony. They had a big video. I'd say the lesson for that year was find your biggest fans. We really focused early on, immediately releasing and working to find who the community was, have like awesome contests with them, really build the kind of the community advocates that you would have, raise those people up, right? What they're interested in is playing your game, and they're probably not doing much more else than playing your game. Listen to them, right? Get really involved. And then 2014 was an interesting year. I think it was one of the first years I went to GDC. So I went and met with the guy who got me into the industry, who, at the time I considered my mentor, was Charlie Cleveland. He at this point was working on a game called Subnautica, which has, been a fantastic success for him. And I remember speaking to him there, and I was like, I'm so worried about this game, Blade Symphony. It was in early access. It hasn't been, it hasn't really been super popularized, successful. It's not a massive hit for us so far, but we're just going to keep working on it and then hope that something picks up before we release it. And he's like, no, man, just release it. Just get it out into the world. And the lesson immediately was release it when it feels ready, because most of the time it's already ready, right? Most of the time it's ready earlier than you think, I should say. The full release for that game was May 2014, and it just took off that year. We did a full release. People loved the game. They were, playing lots and lots and lots of hours. So, if you don't, I guess another way of saying is don't let the, what do they say? Don't let the enemy of perfect, be, I forgot how it goes, but it's
my God. Yeah, you're getting into some really Sun Tzu shit right there.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's all applicable, right? Like, you be in the industry long enough, and all these lessons you hear from
I know
people sort of just, and they ring around in your head constantly. Have a quote board, I would recommend put up quotes to constantly remind you of those things. Let's see. So we released it. It was really fantastic because at the time we were a bunch of kids in our basement, kind of, paying each other sort of part-time, and some of us were full-time, and we hadn't had a massive success. And then all of a sudden we're making millions of dollars on Perfect is the Enemy of Good. Thank you. Yes. Perfect is the enemy.
And the username checks out as well. So yes.
That's a perfect username. But yeah, no, we the next year we released the game, and it was a great year for us in 2014. But in 2015, oh man, that was I don't know if many people remember, that was the time when self-publishing was taking off. They called it the indie apocalypse. Now they've used that term lots since then, right?
Yeah.
But I got some notes here. In 2013, there were 435 Steam games that were released. So 435.
That's tiny now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In 2014, there were 1,700 games. So it was a massive uptick. And then in 2015, almost double that at a little under 3,000. And that's per Steam DB, right? So, we were working on our third game at that point called Galicide. And we, I think, made a critical mistake. And we relied on our past successes. We looked at Steam and we said, if you just get it out, it's going to be a success because there's so few games. But that wasn't true. That unfortunately was not true. And, we were young. We were still trying to figure things out. And, for reference, I think last year in 2023 is 15,000 games were released during the year. And
I was just Googling it. Last year was 14,000.
Yeah. 14,509. Yeah. It was
somewhere in that.
So many. Right. And I think that's, that's another sort of valuable side lesson for people developing games these days. Try and put your title on as many platforms as possible. There generally is a race to early platforms because they think, hey, it's an investor, it's a gamble, it's a risk, right? If it pays off and this platform takes off, the game that we developed for it is going to be, it's going to be a massive hit right alongside of it. So, if you're working on an indie game, work with Microsoft, work with Nintendo, work with Sony, obviously work with all the different stores on PC and try and get your game on as many platforms as possible. I think Rami Ismail has a couple of great talks on that topic because his games have obviously been on practically every platform. But in 2015, we relied a lot on our past successes, and Galicide didn't do very well. That was the last year that Puny Human was focusing on our own original IP development, so our own games. And the next year, we learned a very valuable lesson, like something that was financially valuable for us, because we had moved the entire team here to Raleigh from across, the country. And we were, we had some money coming in from Blade Symphony and a little bit from Galasai, and it was great. We were, before this, just a bunch of kids in our basement, but we had to pivot because Galasai didn't make enough money. 2016's lesson was quickly, pivot, but only if it makes sense for you, right? If your company is struggling and you're trying to make your own game, we considered at the time work for hire. That was something that we went right into, but there's other things you can do, right? I know some companies that do contracting for just for narrative. There's some companies that get into web design and web development. There's some companies that just look for something completely different. A couple of friends of mine, the Limited Run guys, Josh Fairhurst, so Josh actually ran a game development studio before Limited Run, and awesome team. They pivoted, right? They said they found a niche in the market, and they said, people really want physical copies of games, and it's been a massive success for them. So think about, don't let your game company sort of just rest fully on what you've put into it. Consider maybe some agility and nimbleness, but only if it makes sense for you, because it might make sense just to shut down. The next couple of years we were doing work for hire stuff, and it was actually a lot of fun. Those couple of years, 2016 all the way to 2023. We grew the team in 2017. So the lesson that year was, don't undervalue yourself or your team. We were starting to work with a lot of really great clients. We didn't know how much our time was worth. One of the things that I tell a lot of people who are trying to get into the games industry, or really just those who are a little bit younger, is think about what your time is worth. Like from an hourly perspective, if you just had to put a number, not based on what you're doing specifically, but think about what your time is worth. Is it, $60 an hour, $100 an hour, 400, 500, it's try and bake that into what you do as a work for hire company is what we weren't doing. We were kind of undervaluing our own team. And then 2018 was interesting. It was a couple rough patches. Touch grass was the lesson for that year. Get some time away to think. I loved walking my dogs. I loved listening to podcasts like IndieGameBusiness. A little plug there. Lots of little podcasts that I would listen to at the time while walking the dogs. And it was really great because I call them shower moments. If you're stuck on a problem, if you're stressed out, if you have a lot of anxiety or depression, take a shower or go for a walk or go outside, get time away from your screen, and you'll just notice that your mind will just completely reset. You'll think about things that you totally forgot. You'll think about new ideas. And then 2019 was a really great year for us. We started working with these guys, Trover Saves the Universe, Squanch Games. So my boss at Epic, Tanya Watson, ended up reaching out to us and saying, hey, we need your help to get this game across the finish line and then get it on all the other sort of consoles. But around that time, a little bit before that, we had actually hired juniors. So if you're running a team, I highly encourage people to take a chance on juniors. I know that there's so many people in the industry, and there's been so many that are veterans and mid-levels and have been around for a long time. But I would say that juniors with a great attitude, hiring based on attitude, can pay off in leaps and bounds for sure. So, we brought on probably 3 or 4 different sort of entry level, good grounding, right? A couple of them went to fantastic schools for game development, had really great understanding of things like C++, but ultimately they just had a fantastic head on their shoulders. Jesse Schell in 2015 had a fantastic talk where he mentions that it's honestly better, and studies will show this, it's better to hire the sort of likable idiot than the knowledgeable jerk, right? Because sometimes, or many times, you'll find that really senior level people are stuck in their ways. They're not really great at dealing with sort of ambiguity or paradox or a lack of documentation. They have a very set thought process. but when you're entry level, junior, even some mid levels, there's a lot that you can teach. And one of those things ideally is that you're teaching them how to be nimble and agile, think on their feet, because this industry is changing all the time. 2020, COVID, the lesson was shared trauma can be a really valuable experience. Don't go looking for trauma. I'm not saying that, but
you didn't have to look for it in 2020.
No, you didn't. It was all around. It was all around us, right? It was a great time for us to bond. We started to play games online with each other, the team. We started to set up just kind of fun nights. I think we were playing a lot of like Deep Rock Galactic at the time it was released, maybe. A couple other games. I was a big Rust fan at the time. It was really good for sort of just getting on with the team and understanding them a little bit better. 2021 was that in spades, because we were starting to kind of come back to the office. We got lots of board game time in. I'd say bring people together was the lesson in 2021. We started to go out again, and I think that if you're working remote, especially, it can be really, really hard to get that kind of social interaction in with people. Spend some time with your friends, spend some time with other people in the industry. Look for maybe your local IGDA chapter, look for, little groups. We have a fantastic collective here in Raleigh called the Triangle Interactive Arts Collective. Get involved with them, get involved with other game developers, because if you are remote, you're fully remote, it can be a social vacuum for you. And 2021 was coming out of a really difficult time for people. 2022, my lesson there would be find advocates. Connect as much as you can. LinkedIn, lots of really, really good influencers on LinkedIn. I'm a big fan of Ben Cavallo of Midwest Games and Michael Fitch of Other Side Entertainment. I would say, follow those people, try and get advocates where you can, meet connections, meet people at conferences, especially. We had a lot of great advocates over the years. Junalee Lee from Excelbyte, Matt Shimberry from Lightforge. Lightforge is local. Charlie Cleveland, who I mentioned, Brian Knox from Dreamhaven, Tanya Watson from Squanch and Bad Robot, and then Eric Marcoulier, who I would also recommend for CEOs and COOs that they work on getting advice and counsel, because at this time we were trying to raise with investors. We were talking to a lot of publishers, so we were connecting a lot, but we had great advocates at our side. And I think that with companies shutting down right now, you need it. You need to reach out. Don't look at LinkedIn as something that it's just, it is a lot of cold calling. It's a lot of people trying to sell you something, but really try and connect with people earnestly. Jump on Discord, get involved in communities, get involved in local initiatives, because people will be able to help you out as much as you possibly can, or as much as they possibly can. And then 2023 was our last year at Puny Human. So to put it bluntly, I think I told you this earlier, the sort of lesson that year, last year at least, would be that when it smells like death, kill it. Puny Human went out of business, and we laid people off in June of last year. But the thing that wasn't mentioned on a lot of the news syndication was that before we took on our last client, we really did consider shutting down beforehand. The market was really starting to turn. It was getting difficult for a lot of people. We weren't having a lot of success with raising money, and we were starting to get a little bit burned out and tired. But the opportunity was still there. We had a fantastic team. I think that we were about 25 people at this time, and there was just so much talent at Puny Human at that time. And I knew that if I kept trying to make something happen, make some sort of miracle, or I think we called it a Hail Mary at the time, happen, that I would only be punishing the team. And I think that when you start to smell that people are kind of, getting a little, I'd say, ready to move on, and there's talk of sort of things, not enough victories, not enough successes, kill it and support your team moving forward as best as you can. And for us, that meant laying off and shutting down. So, November of 2023 was the last payroll cycle for us. So Puny Human is pretty officially dead. But yeah, I'd say, all together, I mean, lots of lessons over 15 years, really, really great time, and looking forward to the future. Not to be, not to have things on kind of a down note, but yeah, looking forward to the future.
It's very hard. And I've been there too. We've hit a rough patch in the past with the Powell Group, and we had to do layoffs, and luckily we got most of those people back. But it's your baby, and you have just such this internal drive of self-preservation that you, at least from my standpoint, I stopped looking at things in a rational sense, and things that would have made business sense I wasn't doing. It ended up working out, but it was not.
Yeah, it
was not the ideal way to deal with it.
No, it's not always the case. Matt Shimberry of Lightforge Games routinely told me last year, he said, death is not the end. He used to work at Cyberlore, and Cyberlore made a number of games, and one of them, my favorite, was Heroes of Might and Magic. That was one of my favorite games. They had an abrupt end, I think, maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. I don't know. I guess it was much earlier than that. But death is not the end, because people like Eric Marcoulier and Joe Minton from DDM, they worked with Matt at Cyberlore, and he kept those connections. He kept good friends in the industry, and I still routinely talk to many people from Puny Human. So you have to realize that if your company is shutting down right now, it's not the end. It's not the end for you. It's not the end for them. It's hard when you hang on to something for so long. It's your baby, like you said, and you don't want to let it go, but you have to understand when it's time.
Yeah. And I mean, so as you were going through it, and we're seeing, I mean, it's rough right now. And people ask me, it's like, have you ever seen it this late? It's like, I have seen, this cycle happen 2 or 3 times in my time in the industry.
Yeah.
I don't ever remember it being this bad.
Yeah.
But we're coming off pandemic, and, everybody just, people were making shit tons of money during the pandemic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
there was, interestingly enough, there was a really good couple of tweets recently from another podcast, and they were talking about like why. I think it was Gary Whitta, who the guy who wrote Rogue One. He was sort of talking about it on Twitter, and was like, why is this contraction even happening in the first place? From a consumer perspective, they were trying to understand from an outside perspective, and somebody responded and made a good point that during 2020 and 2021, there was a lot of risk calculations that were being made because everybody was inside playing games. So, the thinking was at the time was that we're building a massive network of gamers, people who probably haven't played games before. Animal Crossing came out, was very, very successful and popular at the time. Disco Elysium, I think, had come out. A lot of people were attracted to games, but so the predictions were that there was going to be a 5% year-over-year growth in the games industry. And I don't think those predictions factored in that we would be moving out of quarantine so quickly. Because, think about it this way. It was only about 1.5 years that we were all in quarantine. It was awful. It felt like forever. But in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't incredibly long. And I think there was a lot of industry analysts that sort of thought it would have this massive reverberating consequences of more people purchasing games, more money needing to be put into the games industry. And that didn't work out. And here we are seeing an immense amount of layoffs. We're also seeing a lot of, I would say, mergers and acquisitions that can make a good amount of redundancies take place. But, there's a lot of lessons from closing a game studio. A good friend of mine just closed his yesterday, unfortunately. And then obviously there's been some layoffs this week. but it's hard. And like you said, this is somewhat cyclical. I'm not sure if you remember the Great Recession in 2006, 2007, 2008. It had its consequences, and I was laid off from Red Storm in 2009 with a number of people, but it was because it was hard for everybody back then. It was very difficult for companies to be able to make money. But we have a different problem these days, right? Companies are still making record profits, yet they're laying off people in droves. So tough time to be in the industry for sure. And I think the best thing you can do is connect with people as much as you possibly can. Obviously, take a break.
Yeah,
take a break as much as you can too. Step back, go out in the woods, spend some time with nature. Friend of mine is the studio head of Funcom here in North Carolina. He took 5 years off after his last position before Funcom, and he sat me down. He's like, "You've been through a lot over 15 years." And I think that goes for many people who are closing companies right now, who are laying off their workforce. Step back, just step back and take care of yourself for a long time. Find what makes you happy again. Exercise, drink water, breathe, those kind of basic things that we tend to forget, in all honesty.
I am sitting here furiously Googling through my inbox because I just saw in one of the newsletters I get, and I don't know if it was from Use or from Simon Carlos or who it was from. Someone had a quick synopsis of like 5 to 10 different reasons why this is, from a business perspective, market perspective, why everything is such a shitstorm right now. And it was really, really good. And I wish I could find it. If I can find it, I'll post it. I'll post it later. But a lot of it is exactly what you just said. There was a lot of growth. There was a whole lot of, oh, wow, look at how everything's going. So everything's going to stay like this, projections. And, there was a lot of hiring from a lot of these studios. The thing that we're seeing on this side, from the consulting company area, we're not losing that many publishers.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, the ones that exist they may be cutting budgets, but they're still looking for stuff. So it's not, yes, it's brutal, but it's not catastrophic. And
it's not the end. It's really not the end too.
No. And during the big one in 2010, the Great Recession. Well, that was when I had the brilliant idea to start a company. And that's what, and I said yesterday on LinkedIn, I said, my prediction is, 12 to 18 months from now, we're going to see a big burst, a big renaissance of indie games, because this is part of that cycle that we see. I mean, 100%. You're an example. You got laid off from Red Storm. What'd you do? You started an indie studio.
Started a company. Yeah.
And so a lot of companies, a lot of people will do that. We'll lose some people from the industry. And quite frankly, God bless you all. I mean, because you have to be a special kind of stupid to stay in this industry. Like we all do.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But, it's one of those things that we see this and it's like, okay, big company, AAAs or bigger companies lay people off. A lot of those people go and start indie studios. They build and build and build. And then if they're successful, they're successful. If not, they go back and work at the AAA again. Yeah. One of the points that I remember was that, you see more layoffs in our industry because our industry has a very old retirement, if there is a retirement age. Yeah. I only know, out of 25, years of doing this, I can probably count the number of people who I know retired on two hands.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Don't.
Yeah, we don't give up. It's an industry of masochists in a way.
Yes,
we want to punish ourselves even when we should be resting. And I think those who are kind of getting into the upper tiers of veteranship, working in the industry for a long time, when it comes time to retire, they just don't. They want to keep making games. They want to keep making something creative. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I think that that kind of knowledge should be propagated downward. There's a lot of people that I know who have been in the industry for so long, and while we know and see that the industry is always evolving, some people think that those people can be obsolete, right? You're obsolete unless you stick in it, stick with it. And I don't think that's true. I think those people who have been in the industry for a long time have a responsibility to, speak about their past, the history, and talk about their lessons. And they do. Sometimes they do. And man, this is a weird industry because people don't retire, but there's so many people who still want to get into making games. And I think, to your point, we're going to see a lot of cool indie games come out. But I think that there's a lot of emerging technology that we've talked about, and there's a lot of opinions on over the last 3 or 4 years that are going to really shift the industry in interesting ways. Personally, like, I'm a big fan of cloud gaming. I love it. I think it's smart. It's not exactly harmful for a lot of people, but it's something that you can, if I can go to the gym and be on the treadmill and play a AAA game on my phone, I think that's the coolest thing ever, right? So
how do you have the coordination to get on a treadmill and then play?
It's got to be something a little bit with an easy control scheme. I think a good example would be that I was recently playing Cocoon. It was one of the indie games that won I think it won the Game Awards Indie Game of the Year. Fantastic game, right? One of the designers, I think, of Limbo and Inside that worked on it. That's one I could work. I could be on a treadmill and play. But I do think that with many of the emerging technologies that are becoming really big talking points in the industry right now, if you're getting into the industry, think about that. Think about not just using that tech, but actually being one of those who gets involved in its construction and its implementation, because for every job that I think we would lose because of this emerging tech, we're going to gain 1, 2, 3 more potentially, just based on the implementation of that technology and the coordination it takes to do it right. I think that's an important lesson for people who are getting in, and people who have been in the industry for a number of years too. It's, stay on top of trends, right? That's the big thing. Because sometimes the trend is looking backward. I think in the case of looking at something like physical games, right? Like, that's, people still want physical games, right? But sometimes it's looking forward. Cloud gaming is really fantastic, and find a way to support that, get that implemented in your game when you're making it. Like I said, get on all the different platforms as much as you possibly can. If I'm going to say, if something like AI makes sense for your game, and ideally it doesn't displace any workers, then there's some cool things that you can do with it to sort of help your process workflow. But that's, whether we like it or not, that's where the industry is going. That's probably where it's going to be in 4, 5, 6 years. So it's a good idea to kind of get involved in that fairly early, I'd say, because a lot of things are going to come out of this massive layoff and downturn that we're in, and hopefully they're really cool indie games that just blow our mind. I think there were some great games that came out after the recession. Maybe they were born of the recession. I'm not quite sure. There was lots of games that we all, I think, played back then that we were maybe World of Goo, I think, was one that stuck out for me. Games that kind of came at a time where it was dark, and people still found time to make something amazing. So hopefully we see more of that. I'm excited.
I know you got a hard stop here in about 9 minutes. We've got 2 questions I want to get to, but I want to say, sure, one of the reasons that I started doing this was exactly one of your points. It's like, those of us who have been doing something in the industry for a long time, and I would say 5, 10 years plus, we tend to assume that all of the younger people coming into the industry know the stuff that we know, but they don't.
No.
And if you don't take that time to say, pass that knowledge down, then it's just going to get lost.
Yeah.
So one, Thomas from YouTube says that after 10 years of working on UX design and animation, I've partnered up with a senior programmer to make a game. We want to release a beta. Should we get a publisher for it, or is it not worth the cut that we might lose?
Oh man, I feel like I'm going to make some enemies here. It's a great question, but I would say I mentioned earlier that Puny Human was formed at a time when self-publishing was all the rage, right? We went to GDC and there were many talks about it and its value. And I think that you can still do that. Personally, I would say that when you get involved with a publisher, you should really think about at what point your title is ready. So generally, I advocate that you don't get involved right away. Don't get involved with a publisher to try and get funding or Jason Della Rocca has a lot of really great GDC talks where he speaks to this. He worked with the Tribes of Midgard team for a long time and, tried to sort of support them. There are other ways to get funding from an early standpoint and don't race to start talking to publishers because more often than not, you're not ready. The title's not ready. And I think it also kind of builds better leverage for you when the game is proven and validated a little bit later in its production cycle. So you can go and say, hey, we just need publishing for sort of just marketing. We need it just to get out there, but by and large, it's done. That being said, it is a great idea to network with publishers early and often because not enough game developers are going to publishers and asking them very clearly, hey, here's my game idea. I'm not asking anything from you, Mr. Publisher, other than, do you think that this has a shot over the next 2 or 3 or 4 years? Publishers spend a lot of time analyzing the market. They're very sharp. Many of them are fantastic at what they do and figuring out where the market is going. But they'll tell you, they'll say like, you know what, I think your game idea has legs and I think it's really cool. So, in a couple of years when you're ready, come and talk to us. But more often than not, their job is to write large reports about the viability of products. So get connected with them and say, I have a cool game idea. Here's sort of what it is. Don't show them a prototype if you're not ready. Don't show them things. Don't get, too invested, but just ask them, do you think that this has legs? Do you think that this has opportunity or possibility? And build those connections over time. Keep those connections warm. I've got my own CRM tool for personal CRM. It's called Monica. It's like a free open source version. Get one of those just so that you can have.
I have not heard of that one.
Yeah, it's like an old digital Rolodex, I guess you could say, right? Like it's self-hosted software. Get it loaded on your computer and just when you meet great people, put them in there and then have something that reminds you to reach out to those great people, see how they're doing, talk about what they're working on. And more often than not, that's how you build advocacy. And those advocates are the ones that will introduce you to publishers. I would say in the case of the question that was asked, though, I think it depends on where you are in your production, your product life cycle. I generally advocate that people try and release without a publisher, or if they have the funding, if they have the ability. One of my good friends is working on a VR game that was recently announced. It's called Nope Challenge. It's pretty much self-published. It's got a lot of promise to it, and he's worked very, very hard on it for many years. You don't always need to go that direction, but you still need to connect with people because it's okay to tell publishers that no, you're not looking to publish. You're not looking to find a publisher, but they can still more often than not help you. This is an industry of goodwill. People will do introductions, even if they're not going to work with you. And they're going to help your game be a success because we all want the same thing. We all want the industry to be a massive success for those who are working in it.
It's my show, so I get to plug my own stuff without having permission, right? It's funny that you mentioned those reports and talking to publishers. That is something that we've just started doing for developers. It's an added service from the Powell Group. We will absolutely go through your game, give you review feedback, and even give you comp sheets on, what you need to be looking at from a market standpoint. It's beautiful. I mean,
yeah, get validated early on, I would say, and definitely get validated with someone like Jay. It's even your friends, people in the industry that have been making games for a long time. Ask them questions. Say, hey, I got this game idea, or I got this prototype. Don't look for your successes, your funding, your marketing plan so early. Just keep making the game. Just keep creating and get it constantly validated.
All right, so Mike secretly told me that he does have a little bit extra time.
Yeah, I got some time.
So we're going to get one more question, and then I want to talk about conferences.
Sure.
This is going to lead into a conference question. Yeah. So from Lee on YouTube, any thoughts on the current market for indies pitching for production funding? Anything different you would do in general or at GDC this year?
Oh, wow. Okay. That is an interesting question, because typically over the years, especially over the last 6 years, I would invite people to talk to, sort of being involved with venture capitalists and investors. I would invite people to talk to them or publishers. But if you're pitching for production funding, don't think about going directly to, publishers with that in mind, because there's a lot of places you can get funding for your project that aren't just publishers, right? So there's lots of funds. Platform holders will tend to sort of give limited funding based on your plans and what you're trying to achieve. We know that there's been many Meta funded VR titles over the last couple of years. That's true to the other platform holders as well. And then I think it's probably a good idea to sort of look for angel investors too, and you can do that by getting involved in those spaces. I think for an indie team, it's tough. It's tough, and my best advice would be do not wait to sort of announce your game and show it to the world. We used to have Screenshot Saturday. That used to be a big thing for a lot of indies. Show your game on Twitter. Show it often. Show your game on Reddit. Show your game on LinkedIn. Show it everywhere to the world, even even if it's not ready. Build that hype, because as you do that and you're making connections with people, you'll stumble upon some really, really great resources for project funding. And I can't think of them all right now, but I think a lot of it comes from your advocates, your network, and then obviously showing something great. Go to conferences, get networked with people, and bring a tablet. Show them what you're working on. If you are in the unfortunate position right now in the industry where you don't have money and you do want to make something, and you feel like you need money to make something, that's a tough one. Just because I think that you unfortunately just will have to either decide whether your project can be made with either time or money, not both, because more often than not, everybody else is looking for funding as well. Tons and tons of indie teams are looking for funding, and it's hard to find. It's hard to come by. If your game is well validated, if there are publishers that have spoken to it, you can take that information. You can take your advocate group, your list of advocates, get introduced to people and say, hey, I showed this game to X publisher and they thought it was great. I'd love for you to take a look at it because we're looking for funding. There's was an Indie Game Fund, Kowloon Knights. There's lots of great teams out there that will look at limited funding. I would highly recommend Jason De La Roca's GDC talks on that topic as well.
All right, I'll go ahead and piss some people off. Lee, given the environment right now, I would not go to GDC for funding.
Yeah.
And I told someone this yesterday. It's going to cost you so much money.
Agreed.
And GDC is...
It's expensive to fly there. It's expensive to stay there. It's expensive to get a ticket.
I booked 2 hotel rooms at a 3-star hotel. Not anything. I'm not at the Intercontinental. I'm not at the W.
Right. Yeah.
Your basic run-of-the-mill 3-star hotel in Union Square. So I'm not having to walk through the Tenderloin and potentially get on my way. $4,000.
Not a surprise. Yeah. For indie teams, there's regional conferences. I think MDev happened for the first time this year is a single day conference. That was a great one. If you're in Montreal, go to MIGS. Look for a local conference, go to that, meet people as much as you can in your state. Look at the game companies that are made here or that are here in your area. Sorry, your province, your state, your country. And then look them up on LinkedIn. Find people who are influencers in that space that are local, and try and maybe reach out to them or follow them and get a little bit of information. But by and large, GDC is going to be very expensive. Many conferences are extremely they're not cost effective. I know that Jay, you have a sort of, a virtual conference.
Ours is extremely cost effective.
It's great.
The meeting pass is $50, or if you ask me, I'll give you a ticket for free. So,
everybody should attend conferences like that for sure.
The big thing, and I just posted the Game Conference Guide website, which I love what they do. They basically keep a pulse on every event in the industry. Go there, find these smaller regional ones. The big difference is GDC is so noisy. You're going to go to GDC, you'll have a 30-minute meeting. That person or you will be 5 minutes late because you've had to run from another hotel. Because keep in mind, business, none of that shit happens on the GDC floor. It all happens at the hotels. And they have to leave 5 minutes early. So you're down to 20 minutes. And I've had years where I had 100 meetings. And I sit down the next week and I'm like, somebody's like, well, what did you think about this game, Jay? I'm like, I don't remember it. It's like, if I didn't have written notes, I would not even remember that.
There's so much information flying at you so fast at a place like GDC that it's not going to be incredibly worthwhile for those that I think are looking for funding. But I mean, if you can go, you should. That being said, it may not be worth the money because it's so expensive. I highly recommend regional conferences, regional groups, your IGA and your IGA chapter, like the North Carolina one we have here, will have we'll have meetings. Get involved with local schools. They have lots of cool meetings. There's bound to be a professor there at one of your local schools that was in the industry for a long time that has good connections. So that's somebody important to know.
So speaking of these smaller regional conferences, you've been working on building one from the ground up and doing that thing that I have sworn I will never do, which is, everybody's like, when are we going to do an Indie Game Business live event? I'm like, never. And it's like, But, so talk about that for a little bit, because you and I are both on the East Coast.
Yes.
We don't have, I went down to DreamHack, this year. And that was great. Yeah. I mean, it's not big on the B2B side yet, but on the great event, but that's it. Everything else, we're either flying 6 hours to Europe or we're flying 6 hours to, not Canada, California.
Yeah. It's amazing to me that there isn't, a GDC of the East Coast with as many people from Europe that work, to fly so far away to go to somewhere like GDC. Obviously we have Gamescom and Gamescom B2B, kind of mid to late part of the year. But there's so many great companies on the East Coast from Tripwire and I think Other Side is up in Boston. They have a lot of companies around Bethesda. You got Firaxis up there, and obviously Bethesda. There should be something that is both cost effective, but a good meeting point for those in California and in Europe to come to the East Coast. And so I've got a lot of post Puny Human projects that I'm working on. And this one is one that I'm really excited about. So I'm working with I think a conference it's a local conference that's been going for quite some time. And we're looking to try and evolve it. And it's kind of from scratch because I've never ran a conference before. And so it's a small group, but we see a lot of opportunity for something like that because in a post-COVID world, people still do want to get together, but it's got to make sense from a cost perspective. It's got to be in a affordable place. There's plenty of cities like Raleigh on the East Coast that are extremely affordable, have direct flights to many, many cities across the United States. And now we have direct flights to Iceland and Paris and Frankfurt and all these great European destinations. So the thinking is, I'm working with a small team to try and make something happen. We had a really great dinner meeting with pretty much every executive, founder, director, or senior manager in the area at companies like Insomniac and Funcom and Epic and Redstorm, but also other companies like Squanch and Methodical and I'm trying to think of all the companies over there.
There's a lot. Because I'm on the list. I've seen it.
Yeah. We had 60 attendees because they all believe in the same thing. We need a strong B2B presence at a time like this. We need to be able to get together face to face and plan for the future. especially considering these layoffs and the studio closures. We want to build something really, really great here on the East Coast for a conference. And so, it's a lot of work. I definitely need a lot of help. So if you're interested in sort of, kind of doing some advisory work, or maybe even helping us actually run it, definitely reach out for sure. It's going to be cool. We're not planning it for this year. It's it's going to take a long time to put this together the right way, and really build something for the future. So it's an exciting project that I am one of many things working on. So
yeah, and it gets back to the fact that none of us ever retire. I was actually having a conversation this morning with one of your compatriots about that conference. So you can lean on me. I don't make it to the dinners because you are like 4 hours from me.
Yeah,
but
pretty far away. Yeah, they're good dinners. Yeah,
it's North Carolina is really spread out. That's the downside of it.
Yep.
Mike, I mean, thanks so much. And
yeah, man.
This is not only 15 years of experience, but it's a lot of practical and having to shut down a studio and figure out what's next and do all that sort of stuff. And I appreciate you going there, man. And it's great for everybody else. Of course, I will be at your disposal should you need more stuff on the conference side. And I'm going to be sending some stuff over next week that I promised anyway.
Yeah, awesome. I think we both want great things for the industry and for the local area. So I super appreciate your help. It's been great talking to you so far.
Dan.
Okay. Well, first, Mike, you have something you want to plug?
Well, I was just going to say, regarding that conference, if you do sort of want to, if you do want to help, do reach out. But there's lots of other sort of cool projects that I'm working on. And I think it's important right now for people who are being laid off to get involved still. So what's up, Jay? Sorry, did I miss something?
Our new website's live.
Nice.
Yeah.
I finally get to see it now.
This is soft launch. I was talking to Katie this morning, and I didn't know she had actually launched it. Ooh. If you go to IndieGameBusiness.com or our old one, IndieGame.business.
Beautiful.
Oh, so I haven't even got to see it.
To Katie Logan Provisions, who is local up here with me in the Boone area. Wow. She has built all of this, and she's in the process of building a one for the Powell Group as well. But now you can finally go to IndieGameBusiness.com and see all of our resources. It used to be, the shit little page that I made however many years ago. And now our podcasts are on there. Our classes are on there. I'm so excited. I have like little goosebumps. I've been waiting for this day for a while. Beautiful. So yes.
Go check it out, people. Go check it out.
Wow. I was engrossed in it. Yes, it's awesome. So check it out, IndieGameBusiness.com. Also, there is a link that is scrolling across the bottom of the screen right here. For those of you that are listening, it's our link tree, linktr.ee. And if you know what a link tree is, you know how to get there. Indie Game Business, that has all of our stuff. It's got links to our Discord. If you're not in our Discord, it's easy. Discord.gg/IndieGameBusiness. But you can check out the merch. We have Indie Game Business podcast. Do you see this logo right here? This is the new Indie Game Business podcast logo. We got new Indie Game Business podcast merch, which is awesome. The merch store is looking really good. We've got another podcast next Friday, and then another one, and another one, and then pretty soon the Indie Game Business Conference is coming up. It's pretty awesome. New merch hype, Pepster says. So thank you all so much for hanging out and joining with us. Thanks so much, Mike. This was awesome. It was great. Thanks for sharing your wealth of knowledge. And that's it.
Yeah, we'll see y'all next week. And it's funny you talked about Josh. Josh is our guest in 2 weeks, so we'll be.
Oh yeah, okay.
Awesome. We will be talking to Josh over at Limited Run. But yes, everyone have a wonderful weekend. Go check out the new website. And Mike, thanks so much, dude. And I'll be in touch very shortly on random stuff too.
Cool. Thank you so much for having me. Have a great day.
All right. Bye, everybody.